Hello, I'm Rachel Ann Goodman, and you're listening to Talk of the Bay on KSQD Radio in Santa Cruz and the Monterey Bay area. We just passed Labor Day, and recently I interviewed a lot of protesters that were at a protest on Ocean Street waving signs and talking about their membership to various unions and why right now it's important for unions to get involved with resisting cuts to funding at universities and other insults to the working people of this country, the removal of bargaining rights from federal workers just being one of the many. If you've lived long enough, you remember Ronald Reagan's removal of the air traffic controllers as one of his first acts as president. And since then, there's been a pretty concerted effort to erode the power of unions in this country. However, there's some good news on this post Labor Day. And I'm here speaking with a member of a new unionized workforce at the UC system, Jeff Edwards. Sorry, I'll edit that. Austin Edwards is a researcher at the University of San Francisco, and he's here with me to talk about a victory for researchers across the UC system. Congratulations, I should say, for unionizing. Tell me why this was so important for researchers across the UC Santa Cruz, UCSF, UCLA, all the different UC system. Why is this a win for workers?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think exactly what you said. Right now, not only are workers' rights under attack, but public funding for research is under attack, as well as higher education on the whole, academic freedom, et cetera. So I think right now, a lot of people, even people who may not have been interested in joining a union, I think have kind of seen um, these attacks and decided that, yeah, I think we're better and stronger together than we are on our own. So, um, just by coming together, we're able to fight these funding cuts in a way that we just can't by ourselves.
And tell me what you do there at UCSF.
Yeah, so I've been at UCSF for about 7 years, and I work in a microscopy core here, which basically just means that we manage a group of high-end imaging equipment that researchers ranging from grad students, postdocs, staff scientists use to study all kinds of things, including disease, how our body fights disease, how drugs affect disease, as well as basic research understanding, how our body works and how biological systems work.
Well, it sounds like an important job, especially for all the science that goes on there, especially medical research that has happened over the years. And there are a number of cuts being proposed across the UC system because of cuts to federal research or clawing back of existing grants. Talk about the importance of unions in this fight to maintain research at these research universities.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think it's instrumental. A couple things come to mind. I mean, so even just stepping back from the federal level, I mean, and potentially in response to the federal funding cuts, Governor Newsom and his administration proposed 8% cuts to the UC system, citing budget constraints and UAW 4811, which is the local that represents 48,000 workers, grad student workers, postdocs, academic researchers, spent a lot of time lobbying in Sacramento against these cuts, and through that action, we were able to reduce the cuts from 8 to 0%. And then, just in terms of nationally, UAW, so United Auto Workers actually represents over 100,000 academic workers. It's not just auto workers. And so UAW has been really at the forefront of the fight against these federal cuts. Actually, today there was some news that Harvard University, in joint with some of the unionized workers there with UAW as well as UAW International. They sued the federal government to basically calling that some of these funding cuts unlawful, and so they won that case, and so I think like just that goes to show that by coming together, we are much better position to fight back against the funding cuts that are threatening some of the most important research that's happening in the world. I mean, United States historically has been at the forefront of scientific advancement, and that's all of that's under threat. And so, yeah, I think unionizing is one of the best ways to really fight back for any average working person.
Let's talk about the way the vote came down, how many people there are in that category. Many people listening might be familiar with the graduate student effort to unionize under the same union, UAW. How hard was it to get signatures to get the vote cast? And what was the percentage of people who eventually said yes to the union?
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. So yeah, just taking a step back, there's 7,200 workers, depending on what day you count on, just because with such a large workforce, you always have some turnover. But yeah, around 7,200 workers. Our jobs range from the kind of work I do, working in a core facility, to data analysis, grant administration. So the folks who navigate the bureaucracy of the NIH or the NSF and help researchers apply for grants, and make sure everything's in compliance. We have compliance analysts who are making sure that all of the research we're doing is ethical and safe. All these people who are instrumental to making sure that the research happens are folks who have historically not had union representation. And so 7,200 of us came together and well, some of us wanted to organize our colleagues, and back in February, we started signing union authorization cards, which is really the first step in forming a union here in California, in the public sector. And so we collected over 2,000 authorization cards, met the required 30% support to have a union election. And so, we basically continued having conversations with each other, and had a vote between August 18th and through the 29th. And I think what really remarkable about this is that so many of us actually live all over the country. Many of us were hired during the COVID pandemic. Many people were able to, realize that they were able to work from home, especially in a lot of these administrative jobs. And so the workforce that we organized was a very remote workforce. Over 90% of us work either fully remote or hybrid in some fashion. So I think that's one of the most interesting and one of the big challenges of organizing this union, was just you can't go up to someone's desk if they live in Florida. You have to call them or find some other way to get in contact with them. So we did a lot of phone banking, a lot of you know, probably too many emails. People are probably sick of hearing about it, but it was just it's such an important thing, and it was really important to make sure that people had their voice heard. So yeah, so we had a union election ending last Friday, and we had a turnout of over 3,000 people. I think 3,600 or so voted. It's the most number of basically the most number of, sorry, biggest number of people voting in a union election this year. Just to give you a sense of the scale, and over 83% of those workers who voted yes. So we really, and everyone knew that this was happening. So, it's not like, and they had 2 weeks to vote. So I think what that tells me is that people were really ready for a union, and that people really thought that this was a good thing to do, not just to address, the kitchen table issues that we often talk about when we talk about bargaining, but also a lot of the things we've been discussing about fighting back against the federal funding cuts.
So you won the union, big victory. is it possible that the UC system could do an end run around you since 90% of you are remote and just make a rule that there's no more remote work and kind of undercut your whole category of workers? It just occurs to me that seems like a vulnerability of that this group of workers, which surprised me how many of them are remote, might have. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting question. I mean, I think a couple things. Well, one is I do think that like the number of workers, it'd be pretty hard on the university to put a big strain on the university to say like let go all those workers who are remote. I do think there's value in our work, and it would be that there's a reason why say if we democratically decided to go on strike, that the university would that would push them to meet demands that we have. So I think that kind of there's protection in the fact that we're so large, and there's so many of us, and so there's protection for things like our remote work status. Another thing is that now that we do have a union, well, without a union, the UC could do whatever they wanted. That's kind of the part of the problem, is that the university really has unilateral control over our working conditions. But with a union, we're able to come together and bargain with the university as equals. And even before we have a contract, if they want to make any major decisions over our working conditions, they have to negotiate that with us first. So I'm not too worried about that, and I do think that like the university will bargain with us in good faith, but we'll see what happens.
Thank you. That's a really interesting situation you find yourself in. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the situation in which the whole university system finds itself. As you alluded to, there's major attacks on all universities, and especially Ivy Leagues, but now the UC system. UCLA was threatened with $1 billion in cuts. So even if you have this power to maintain wages and get better working conditions and hours, which I want to talk about specifically in a moment why this was such a win. But I also wonder, does it make the university even more up against another wall to have people demanding to keep jobs when this huge amount of funding for research is being threatened to be suspended or removed? Uh, and we can talk about the legitimacy of the reasons this is supposedly at stake. But the reality is, uh, the UC system is being threatened with a huge withdrawal of federal funds. 1 billion
Yeah.
is just unfathomable as far as
Totally. I mean, the institution I work for, UCSF, received a similar kind of demand, not, and not a dollar amount yet, but a demand to kind of, work with the Department of Justice on like fighting, illegal affirmative action practices or whatever else the federal government is claiming. So yeah, I totally know the reality, and it's worrisome for sure. I think a couple of things, I'll allude back to what I was just saying about how by coming together as a union, we can, fight some of these challenges with the university, right? Like that court case that I mentioned, that was decided today. It was not just graduate student workers at Harvard, the union suing the government, but it was also Harvard, the administration. So the people they were, kind of they had a common enemy and came together. So, I look forward to working, me and the thousands of us who are excited about this are looking forward to working with the administration where, our goals align. And I think our goals align on keeping federal funding, coming to the university and supporting the life-saving research, the fights, the research to fight climate change, all these other issues that are so existential. We'll definitely work with the university in that case. So I don't think there's any worry there. In terms of raising wages, for instance, for workers here in a time where funding is tenuous, especially federal funding. I do think that there are, if you look at the budget of the university, it's not just relying on federal funds. There's a lot of money that the university generates through not just grants, but also medical centers, through real estate investments, through other investments, and
And
so
patents, I mean, patents
and
has is
patents.
another fight going on about who owns those patents. But
Yeah, right.
yeah,
I mean, I think, but I guess my point is that like there's so many other sources of funding, and there's a lot of decisions that the university makes. Back in May, university, bought I forget the name of the university campus. It was like University of uh, Notre Dame. It's some campus on the peninsula. So they spent a lot of money to buy this real estate. When At the same time that we are, experiencing these funding issues. So, I do think for me, and so many of my other coworkers that I've talked to through this effort is that it's not, we definitely, don't expect money to materialize out of nowhere. But I also think that like, this unionization effort is in response to decades of neglect for staff who are instrumental in getting that funding in the first place. And so, um, I think, yeah, just the cost of living and skyrocketing in California, especially, the housing crisis, all these things have just made working here unsustainable. And if we want to continue to be the best public research system in the world, then we need to invest in staff and research staff that are working here. So, yeah, I mean, I don't see these fights as I think the UC administration wants research to continue, and so do me and my coworkers, and this is how we do it, in my opinion.
you mentioned housing, which is really, a really crux issue for many UC employees. I don't know how many of the cities in which the universities are placed find themselves in housing crises, but I know San Francisco, I know Santa Cruz, LA, they're all impacted heavily.
Yeah, Santa Barbara is another one I know is feeling it.
Yeah, a lot of you are living in maybe less expensive areas. A lot of the people you mentioned, 90% of these research employees are living outside of the state. Is that correct? Or just working
No,
remotely?
yeah, they're working remotely at least part-time. So, they might come into the office a couple of days a week, and that allows them to live farther away, like you're saying, basically, is that they can, potentially live, 2 hours away, and only commute in a couple of days a week, and then the other time they can spend, actually working.
Right. And I listened to one of the interviews with the workers that were organizing this fight to unionize among researchers. And one of them said, they had gotten a 4% raise and inflation went up 8% the same year. So it sounds like wages have not kept up with inflation, and inflation has been zooming up pretty fast. So the housing, the wages, and I also heard one researcher, I think it was at the Berkeley labs for space exploration, satellite launching, they talked about the hours they work. So, talk a little bit about what employees were experiencing it in a little bit more depth as far as sort of being exploited. Let's just face it, if you work 10 hours a day and you haven't had a vacation like in years, that feels unsustainable. So I'm sure that's one of the things that the union is going to be working on. But talk about that across the board. What are you hearing as far as people's realities?
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, I think that's right. Just speaking from my own experience, yeah, we got like a 3.4% cost of living adjustment. For non-unionized staff, UC will kind of throw us a bone and give us a 2 to 4% wage increase per year. There's no guarantee of like, any bonuses or anything like that. There's and during certain times, UC has the sole discretion to not give us that. So like during COVID, I got 0%. But inflation still went up, and cost of living still went up. And so, yeah, that's absolutely a pressing issue. I think another thing that you kind of alluded to is overwork and what we call scope creep, where folks are hired into a position, they are given, a workload that is sustainable, and then over time, the responsibilities that they're expected to carry out are expanded and without any discussion of compensation. And so, they're basically being asked to work a lot more with just as much compensation. So I think a lot of these issues, yeah, are just issues that can be solved through forming a union, getting UC to, they can ask for survey. A lot of times UC and other employers will send surveys, like employee surveys, asking folks like what they want, what they think. But again, they have no obligation to address any of these things. The only way that they are obligated to address them is by workers at their uh, in at the place of employment unionizing and collectively bargaining with the administration, with the employer. And so that's really why we're doing this, is because we've through countless town halls and meetings and everything, we've given our input and asked for the things that we need to do our jobs correctly and sustainably, and it just hasn't been met. And so that's why we're doing it. Is that's why so many of us are excited about this effort, is that we actually can have a seat at the table and talk about these issues with the administration on equal footing. Another, I guess, a couple of other things that people want to address. I think healthcare costs are always going up as well. That's not unique to us, but definitely something that is still a reality. And then, I think the career development and kind of how one at the University of California kind of progresses in their career is very unclear. It's very, um, a lot of the folks I've talked to, they've told me, and it's been my experience as well, is that like if you want a promotion, you should just move to a different department rather than like getting promoted where you are, which I think is just another, unsustainable practice. You want people in the same job. If they've learned all these skills, they're really good at what they do. You don't want them to have to move departments to get a promotion, to be able to renegotiate their terms. And have to learn a whole new skill set, or some of those skills may be transferable but not all. So I think, like, there's a lot of other issues as well, but I think these are some of the major ones, including protecting the flexibility that people have in remote and hybrid, remote sometimes in person schedules. I think all of these issues are kind of at the forefront of at least in the conversations I've been having with my colleagues.
And I'm sure as you get together as a union, you're going to be talking about what your priorities are to push for first and second and third. Before we close, I've been speaking and I am speaking with Austin Edwards. He's a representative of the newly formed union under the United Auto Workers of America, a union that contains 100,000, I think you said, academic employees as well as auto workers. And they just won the union vote amongst 7,200 workers across the UC system that do research. And so one of the questions I wanted to ask you is this: is there any typical profile of one of these unionized workers that people might want to know about? Like, do they all have PhDs? Do they all come out of the university and stay there as an employee? And what are some of the essential jobs that they do? I know that's three questions, and I always tell my journalism students never to ask them, but because we need to wrap up, I want to get to a couple of those, like who are you all and why is it
Yeah.
important? Sort of the reason I'm asking.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, unfortunately, there's not really an easy answer. I think we come, I mean, especially, 7,200 workers, that's a lot of people, and especially in these jobs that don't necessarily require a PhD. I don't have a PhD, but many of my colleagues do, and so it definitely ranges. It depends on the job. And some of us are parents, some of us are international workers, some of us are white guys like me, some are trans, and African American, etc. It really, like, we're a diverse group of people, and I think that the one of the things that we've really tried to do is make sure that, like, all of these people are represented. one of the things we make sure we do is that our organizing committee is including people from diverse backgrounds, but also from different job titles and different departments, because that's really where the strength of our union is going to come from is making sure that everyone's voices are heard and people's needs are met. But also, it just allows, workers to talk to their coworkers, right? I'm just one person and I could not possibly talk to 7,200 workers. And so it's really important that you have a large, diverse group of people talking to each other. And then the last question you asked was what kind of jobs do we do? I kind of listed it earlier, but just to recap, yeah, we're staff here at UC that I guess not all of us do come from the UC system, though many of us do. Many of us were former UAW 4811 members, and many of them are missing the protections and benefits that they got in their union contract, and so they're excited about this effort and talking, and organizing. But really, the work we do is in support of the research and public service missions of the university. So, uh, as I mentioned, we do data analysis for research projects, grant administration, and management, project management. Field research, survey research, et cetera. So all over
You're
the
like the
place where,
worker bees of the research
yeah,
body of the UC system, which has produced some amazing results for medical advancement. If you ever got a titanium part of your body replaced, put in your body, it probably came from the UC system. If were involved with a medical trial and that helped you, that might have been the UC system. The fact that this state has been I think, what is it, the fourth biggest economy in the world, the fact that it is largely because of this world renowned university system that churns out amazing breakthroughs in technology and science and psychology and all these
it's the
other things.
largest employer in the state. So, in the fourth largest economy, it's the largest employer in the fourth largest economy in the world. So just to give folks the sense of the scale here.
And in our town in Santa Cruz, it's one of the biggest employers as well. And so all of this unionizing definitely affects a lot of people in our community. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about this big victory you had, as it was just Labor Day and people from unions hit the streets in protest of the cuts and attacks, a lot of the ideological attacks on universities in general follow a pattern of other countries like Hungary for attacking universities, especially their public ones, because in Hungary, they're almost all public. And when you cut 40% from universities at large, in that country, you almost eliminate all of them. So we need to, in my opinion, protect from that effort, which seems to be the reason they're cutting billions, not DEI or any of those other excuses. So unions have a big role to play, and I applaud you for your victory and I appreciate your time today. So thank you so much, Austin Edwards, for your efforts and for being with us here on Talk of the Bay.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here.